I came in early that morning, too early, probably. The building was still half asleep, its hallways echoing with the hum of fluorescent lights and the soft squeak of my cartwheels. The air smelled faintly of coffee and glass cleaner. Somewhere above me, the city was already awake, but on the 34th floor of Morrow International, time felt suspended. I always started my shift before sunrise. It was easier that way, no curious stares from employees in polished shoes. No awkward smiles when they realized they were stepping over the girls scrubbing their floors. It was quiet, and quiet made sense to me. The elevator ride stretched forever. The screen blinked through numbers dash 20 dash 7, 28, 29 each ding like a heartbeat. I caught my reflection in the brushed metal doors, the loose bun I'd tied in a rush, the faded gray hoodie I'd worn for 3 years, and the security badge clipped crookily to my chest. My mother's voice drifted through memory. Do your work with dignity. Marley, doesn't matter what it is. Floors, windows, hearts, they all shine when you care for them. She'd been gone for 2 years now, and still, every mop stroke I made felt like I was trying to keep that promise alive. When the elevator doors opened, I rolled my cart into a corridor lined with glass offices and silver plaques. The 34th floor wasn't my usual route. I usually clean the south wing, but last night's schedule had been changed, and I didn't think twice. I just wanted to get it done before the executives arrived. At the far end of the hall, a set of tall double doors stood open. Inside, I saw sleek chairs, a long conference table, and the faint shimmer of light on the polished floor. I figured the room was empty. I figured wrong. The moment I pushed my cart in, silence hit me like cold air. A dozen heads turned at once. Men and women in expensive suits froze mid-motion, eyes wide. At the head of the table stood a woman I recognized instantly. Even though I'd never seen her in person, Camille Morrow, her photos were everywhere in business magazines, company newsletters, even the elevator screens. Vision, power, precision. The kind of woman who didn't just walk into a room. She altered its gravity. In person, she was sharper than her pictures, dark hair pulled into a sleek knot, jaw set like sculpted marble. Her charcoal suit pressed so perfectly it could have sliced through the tension around her. Her lipstick was the color of fresh blood, and she was angry. Not loud angry. The kind that throws papers or shouts, but quiet angry. The kind that burns without smoke. Her arms were crossed, her eyes narrowed on someone at the table. Let me be perfectly clear, she said, her voice smooth and dangerous. If I have to sit through one more presentation filled with recycled strategies and ego-driven nonsense, I will fire every last one of you and run this company myself until I drop dead. No one breathed. No one even blinked. And that was the moment I realized I had just walked into the middle of a war zone armed with a mop. Oh, I whispered, trying to back out. Sorry, I didn't know anyone was too late. She was already looking at me. For a heartbeat, Camille Morrow didn't move. Then something shifted in her expression, like the world had tilted a fraction of a degree. Her gaze landed on my name badge, then back to my face. Her voice, when it came, was softer but no less sharp. Who are you? I froze. Marley, I stammered. I cleaned the south wing. I think I came in too early. She said my name like she was tasting it for the first time, Marley. Then, as if she'd reached some private decision, she said the words that would split my life in two. The next person who walks through that door, she murmured, I'll marry them. For a second, I thought she was still talking to her board, until her eyes locked on mine. I mean it, she said. Someone at the table laughed nervously. Another coughed. I gripped the cart handle tighter, heart hammering. Sorry, what? Camille took a slow step toward me. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, each one like a countdown. Would you marry me? The room spun. It was absurd, ridiculous. some kind of cruel joke rich people made when they were bored or angry. I half expected someone to burst out laughing, to tell me it was a test or a prank. But no one did. Her assistant whispered, "Miss Morrow, you can't be serious." Camille lifted one hand. "Try me." Silence swallowed everything. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a strange, dizzying second, I couldn't tell if she was furious, heartbroken, or both. Her eyes weren't cruel. They were tired, like someone who'd run out of reasons to pretend. I swallowed hard. "You don't even know me." "That's the point," she said. "I've spent years surrounded by people I thought I understood. Maybe it's time I try something different." My mind was screaming, walk away, but my legs didn't move. There was something magnetic about her not attraction. Not yet, but a pull, like gravity insisting on something I couldn't name. Someone coughed again. Someone else whispered, "Is she joking?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to laugh and leave and pretend none of it happened, but my voice caught in my throat. "You're insane," I said softly. Her lips twitched. "Also completely." And just like that, the edges of her anger softened, the sharpness in her eyes blurring into something almost human. She took another step closer. "You'll live in my home. You'll be compensated generously. You'll have privacy, respect, freedom to leave whenever you want." "I was just trying to take out the trash," I muttered. Camille tilted her head. "And now you're being offered a marriage contract with the CEO of Morrow International. Life is strange, isn't it?" The boardroom murmured, half disbelief, half fascination. The smell of coffee and tension filled the air. "Why?" I asked finally. "Why me?" Camille's eyes softened, almost imperceptibly. "Because I think you walked into my life for a reason." For a long, suspended moment, no one moved. Then I nodded barely, quietly, but enough. Maybe I was agreeing. Maybe I was just too stunned to refuse. Behind me, someone gasped. Camille's mouth curved into the faintest, most dangerous smile I'd ever seen. "We'll begin arrangements tomorrow," she said. I didn't even realize. I was still holding the mop handle until it creaked in my grip dot as I walked out of that glass room. My heart thundering, the world felt suddenly wider. Stranger like everything I'd ever known had cracked open and through the fracture. Something new and terrifying was waiting. I didn't know if I'd made a mistake, or if I'd just walked straight into a miracle. It's strange, the sound of silence when it's too expensive to touch. That was the first thing I noticed after I signed Camille Mara's contract, how silence could echo off marble floors, through glass walls, and into the hollow part of your chest where your breath usually lives. I'd never seen a house like hers. Every surface gleamed like it had something to prove. The air itself smelled expensive, faintly floral and metallic, like it had been filtered through a machine that rejected dust and people who didn't belong. And yet, there I was, standing in the middle of it, holding a signed contract that said I was now legally Mrs. Camille Morrow. It didn't feel real. I'd gone home that night after the boardroom fiasco, my head spinning. I told myself she'd call it off. She'd laugh about it over champagne with her friends and forget the janitor who walked into her meeting. But she didn't. The next day, a black car showed up outside my apartment with a driver who said, "Miss Morrow is expecting you." Now, as the doors to her penthouse closed behind me, I realized she meant every word. Camille was already inside, standing by the floor-to-ceiling window. Her reflection caught the city lights like a secret. She didn't turn when she said, "I don't like noise." Her voice was the kind that made you straighten up without thinking, calm, commanding, too careful to ever tremble. I'll be quiet," I said, my hands gripping the strap of my worn-out bag. She turned then, eyes sharp, but not unkind. "You always are." That was the first thing she ever noticed about me, that I was quiet. She gestured toward a sleek black folder on the table. There are rules, she said. Read them carefully. You can stay here, but there are boundaries. No press, no discussions with anyone at Morrow International, and no personal appearances without my approval. Her words fell like the click of a pen, precise, final. I opened the folder. Inside were typed clauses that made my head hurt. This feels like a job, I said softly. It is, she replied, walking past me, her perfume trailing warmth through the cold room. You'll find it pays better than the last one? Something in her tone made me look up. I couldn't tell if it was arrogance or something Lonelier. That the first nights were the hardest, that her house didn't sleep. It hummed with hidden machines, the soft thrum of the fridge, the distant whir of the elevator. The heartbeat of money. My room was twice the size of my entire apartment, but it felt smaller somehow. I'd unpacked my few things, 2 books, a framed picture of my mother, and a chipped coffee mug she used to call lucky. They looked out of place here, like kindness in a courtroom. Camille and I barely spoke that first week. We shared breakfast at a glass table where everything clinked too loudly. She drank black coffee and read 3 newspapers at once. I tried to make conversation once, something about the weather, but she just nodded absently, eyes still scanning the news dots, so I learned to match her silence. But sometimes I'd glance up and catch her watching me, not with judgment, but with the faintest curiosity. Like I was a puzzle she didn't quite want to solve yet. It changed one night. Around midnight, I couldn't sleep and went to the kitchen to make tea. She was there already, barefoot, leaning against the counter with a glass of whiskey. Her jacket was gone, her hair loose, her face softer than I'd ever seen it. Oh, I stammered. Sorry, I didn't mean to. It's fine, she said quietly. I couldn't sleep either. We stood there for a moment, both unsure of the rules in this strange arrangement. She gestured to the kettle. You drink tea at night? I nodded. My mom used to say it keeps the noise in your head from getting too loud. Camille smiled faintly, the kind of smile that looked like it hurt to remember how. She sounds wise. She was, I said. She always told me to find dignity in small things. Even cleaning floors? Camille looked at me then, really looked. That's beautiful. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. I wanted to ask her about her own noise, what kept her awake at night, but something in her expression stopped me. It wasn't distance. It was defense. Instead, I poured her a cup too. She didn't ask, but she took it. That was the first time we sat together without titles. Days passed like glass, transparent, but fragile. Camille's world ran on schedules and silence. Mine ran on heartbeats and hesitation. Somewhere between them, we began to find a rhythm. She started noticing small things. One morning, when I came down for breakfast, my coffee was already waiting. 1 sugar, no cream. I hadn't told her that. You remembered, I said, surprised. I pay attention. She replied simply, turning a page in her newspaper, and I began to notice her too. How her hands trembled slightly when she thought no one was watching. How she stood at the window every evening, shoulders squared against the world like it was a battle she couldn't afford to lose. Sometimes I'd catch her staring out at the skyline, her reflection flickering against the glass. And I'd think, for someone so powerful, she looked so tired. Then came the night of the storm. Rain slammed against the windows. Thunder rolled like a warning. The power flickered once, twice, then died completely. I found Camille in her study, the faint glow of her phone lighting her face. Generators down. She said calmly, though I could hear the edge in her voice. I'll call maintenance. Maybe. I hesitated. Maybe it's okay to wait. Sometimes silence isn't so bad. She looked at me, then at the darkened room. And for the first time, she put the phone down. We sat by the window, listening to the storm. she said after a long pause. People think I like control. They don't understand. It's the only way I know how to survive. Her honesty startled me. Doesn't it get lonely? Camille's jaw tightened. Loneliness is easier to manage than disappointment. I wanted to reach out, to tell her that control and loneliness weren't the same thing, that one could choke the other if she wasn't careful, but instead, I just whispered, "You don't have to manage everything alone." For a moment, the storm outside was nothing compared to the silence that followed. Then she smiled, barely, but it was real. "You really believe that, don't you?" "I have to," I said. "It's how people like me keep breathing." After that night, something shifted. We didn't talk about it, but it lived in the quiet, the soft glances, the half smiles, the unspoken understanding that maybe, just maybe, this strange arrangement was becoming something else, not love, not yet, but something close, something like trust. She began asking me about my mother, about the books I read, about the places I dreamed of visiting. And I began to see the woman beneath the empire, one who'd built walls so high even she couldn't see the sky. Sometimes, when she'd leave early for work, she'd pause by the door and say, "Take care of yourself, Marley." And those 5 words would follow me all day like sunlight through fog. I don't know when the boundaries began to blur. Maybe it was when she started making tea instead of whiskey at midnight. Maybe it was when she laughed, really laughed, at my clumsy attempt to cook dinner. Or maybe it was when I realized her silence no longer scared me, whatever it was. I knew one thing for sure, for the first time since stepping into her world. I didn't feel like I didn't belong, and for the first time, Camille Morrow looked at me not as an accident, but as something inevitable. The first headline appeared 2 weeks after the storm night. Camille Morrow's secret marriage. Who is the unknown wife? By morning, it was everywhere. News tickers ran it, tabloids twisted it. Even the building's doorman whispered behind polite smiles. At first, I laughed nervously when I saw it. Then I looked at Camille. She didn't laugh. She sat at the breakfast table, still in her blazer, phone in one hand, untouched coffee in the other. The screen reflected off her glasses, lighting her face in harsh blue. "Who leaked it?" she said quietly, more to herself than to me. Her assistant's voice came muffled through the speaker. "We're trying to trace it. It might have come from inside the board. Of course it did." Her tone cut through the air like glass snapping. When she hung up, the silence between us turned heavier than the city skyline outside. "It'll die down," I said softly. Though even I didn't believe it. Camille looked up, eyes sharp but tired. "Nothing dies down in my world, Marley. It just gets rebranded." She stood abruptly, already grabbing her jacket. "Don't leave the house today." That was all. No goodbye. No reassurance. Just control. Again, and just like that, the walls between us began rebuilding themselves, clean, cold, and unbreakable. The days that followed felt like walking through invisible fences. Camille buried herself in work, meetings, calls, damage control. I'd hear her pacing in her office long past midnight, voice clipped, furious, afraid. Once, I brought her tea and left it on the corner of her desk. She didn't look up. "Thank you," she murmured automatically, her eyes never leaving the screen. I stood there for a few seconds, waiting for what? I didn't know, then quietly walked away. The sound of her typing followed me down the hall like rain. The press didn't stop. They wanted a face, a story, a scandal. Paparazzi camped outside the building. Reporters tried to bribe the cleaning staff. I couldn't go anywhere without feeling like I was trespassing on her life. At home, Camille barely spoke. We ate in silence again. Her phone buzzed constantly. Her laughter, the one I'd started to love, vanished. She was retreating. And I didn't know how to reach her this time. It was nearly 2 a.m. when I found her. The storm had returned, same thunder, same restless sky. The house was dark except for the soft glow spilling from her office. I pushed the door. Open quietly. Camille was sitting on the floor, her back against the couch, her knees drawn up to her chest. The papers around her were scattered, contracts, reports, headlines, her entire empire in fragments. Her face was wet, the woman who had terrified boardrooms, who never flinched under pressure, who once looked at me like I was an inconvenience, was crying, not delicate tears, silent ones. The kind you don't even notice until they've already fallen. She didn't see me at first. Or maybe she did, but didn't care. Everything I built, she whispered. They think I've lost my mind. Investors are pulling out, the board's calling for an emergency review. She pressed her hands to her temples. All because of this stupid stunt. Camille. I started, but she shook her head violently. They think I married you out of rebellion. Or loneliness. Or worse, weakness. I knelt beside her, unsure what to say. Her voice broke again, raw, trembling. I've spent my whole life proving I don't break. And now, her sentence collapsed into silence, without thinking. I reached out and touched her hand. She didn't pull away. For the first time since I met her, Camille Morrow let someone see her without the armor. We stayed like that for a long time, not speaking, not pretending. The only sound was the rain against the glass, and somewhere in that quiet, something shifted. She leaned against me, just slightly, and breathed. A shaky human breath. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was real. The next morning. The air between us had changed. Camille didn't apologize. She wasn't the kind who used words for things that deep, but she made breakfast herself. Burnt toast, scrambled eggs, and orange juice poured too high into the glass. I stared at the plate. Then at her. I forgot how to cook, she said with a smile. Embarrassed laugh. It was the first laugh in weeks. I didn't know whether to cry or smile, so I just said, it's edible. Don't push your luck, she teased softly. But her eyes were gentle again. Days turned into weeks, and little by little, the tension softened. She started leaving her office door open when she worked. Sometimes she'd call me in, not for anything important, just company. One evening, she asked, what did you want to be before all this? Alive, I said without thinking. Camille smiled. That's honest. What about you? I asked. She paused, tracing the rim of her glass. Free. The word hung in the air between us. Fragile, dangerous. From what? I whispered, expectation. Image, my own name, maybe. She looked up at me, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen. You make me forget it sometimes. I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened. So I smiled instead. That was enough. We began having slow mornings, the kind where she'd come downstairs barefoot, hair still damp from the shower, and sit quietly across from me while the city woke up outside. Sometimes she'd tell me stories about her childhood, how her father used to call her Little General, how she learned to win arguments before she learned to ride a bike. Other times, she'd just listen while I talked about my mother, about the smell of cinnamon in our kitchen, about the way she'd hum when she cleaned. Camille started humming too, sometimes absent-mindedly. I caught her once, halfway through an old melody, and she blushed like she'd been caught doing something indecent. I laughed. You're terrible at pretending to be heartless, you know? She gave me a mock glare. Don't tell the board. It was during one of those mornings, soft light, half-empty mugs, newspaper abandoned, that I realized it. I loved her, not the CEO, not the woman in the sharp suits or the headlines or the glass towers. I loved the one who burned toast on purpose just to make me smile, the one who fell asleep on the couch with her glasses still on, the one who looked out at the skyline like it might forgive her one day, and it terrified me. because love wasn't part of the contract. Love didn't belong in her world. But every time our eyes met, when she handed me a cup of coffee, when she said my name like it meant something, I felt the walls inside me start to fall. Camille changed too. She laughed more, worked less. Once she canceled an entire meeting to take a walk with me by the lake. She said she needed air, but I knew better. There were moments, fleeting, fragile, when I caught her looking at me with something that wasn't curiosity anymore, something warmer, something that scared her, as much as it did me. Once. She brushed a strand of hair from my face, then froze like she'd crossed the line. Sorry, she murmured. Don't be, I said quietly. The air between us shimmered, not electric, not bold, just quietly alive. Neither of us said it. Neither of us had to. We both knew. The glass had cracked, and through it, for the first time, light began to pour in. A full year passed like the turning of a slow, deliberate page. Seasons changed outside the glass walls of Camille's penthouse. Snow to rain, rain to sunlight, sunlight to the cool blush of autumn again. Inside, life had fallen into a rhythm that neither of us had expected, and both of us had come to depend on. It was on a quiet Thursday morning, one that smelled faintly of coffee and city fog, when she placed a folder on the breakfast table between us. I didn't need to open it to know what it was. The contract, she said. Her tone was calm, almost too calm. It expires tomorrow. The words sat between us like an invisible border. I looked down at the folder, the neat lettering of my name and her handwriting. Marley, so simple, so final. I tried to joke. Do I need to sign anything else? Or is this the part where you officially fire your fake wife? Camille didn't smile. Her gaze drifted to the window. This is the part where you get to walk away. Something in my chest twisted. I traced the rim of my coffee cup with a finger, watching the steam curl upward. Right, I said softly. Walk away. She nodded, still not looking at me. You've kept your end of the arrangement better than I had any right to expect. You've endured the press, the board, my moods. Me, you deserve a normal life again. A normal life. I wanted to ask what that even meant anymore. Instead, I said, I'll think about it. Camille gave a short, polite nod, like we were discussing quarterly reports instead of the end of something that had quietly become everything. Then she left the room, leaving the faint scent of her perfume behind, sharp, elegant, familiar. Days passed with a kind of suspended tension. We moved around each other like ghosts in the same house. The spaces that used to be alive with conversation and soft laughter became heavy again, filled with unspoken words. I caught her staring at me sometimes in the hallway, across the living room, over dinner, but she always looked away too quickly. I tried to tell myself it was better this way, that we'd both known it was temporary, that what we'd shared had already been more than I could have imagined when I first walked into that boardroom a lifetime ago. But every night, lying in the two-big bed, I found myself listening for her footsteps. Sometimes I thought I heard them. A soft shuffle outside my door, a pause, then retreat. Neither of us knocked. On the evening before the contract ended, the city lights shimmered like restless stars across the skyline. Camille sat by the window, glass of wine in hand, her reflection split between the darkness outside and the soft lamp glow inside. Do you remember, I began carefully, the first thing you said to me? She turned, arching a brow. In the boardroom? Would you marry me? A faint smile tugged at her lips. I was half out of my mind. Maybe, I said. But it worked. Her smile faded. Did it? The question lingered, heavier than I was ready for. I crossed the room, sitting opposite her. It worked for me, I said finally. She looked at me then, really looked. Why? Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't invisible. Because you made me part of something bigger than myself. Because you taught me what it looks like to care, even when you don't mean to. I hesitated, because I don't want to go. Her breath caught, just slightly. You don't owe me anything, Marley. Her voice was quieter now, fragile at the edges. You signed a deal, not a promise. I gave you a way out. I never wanted out, I said. The words came out softer than a whisper, but they landed like a truth neither of us could unhear. She set her glass down, her fingers trembling slightly against the stem. You're free, she said again, but there was no conviction left in it. I moved closer. Maybe freedom isn't leaving, Camille. Maybe it's staying when you finally have the choice. She exhaled shakily as if she'd been holding her breath for a year. You don't understand. I don't know how to do this, any of this, without control. Without rules. Without hurting someone. Then learn, I whispered. With me. For a long moment, the room held its breath. Then she reached forward, her hand finding mine, hesitant, almost disbelieving. I thought I'd built a life too strong for anyone to touch, she said, voice trembling now. But you, she stopped, eyes bright. You walked in with a trash bin and tore it all apart. A laugh escaped me, small and aching. You make it sound romantic. It is, she said simply. Terrifying, but romantic. We didn't kiss then. There was no dramatic declaration, no sweeping music or lightning flash. Just two people sitting across from each other, hands entwined, breathing the same uncertain air. Then Camille stood, walked to the table, and picked up the folder. She held it out to me. Here, I took it. The papers inside were crisp, perfect, her signature, mine, dates, terms. A contract that had defined our entire year. Camille looked at me for a long moment, then at the window, where the city glowed like an endless possibility. Let's end it properly, she said. Before I could ask what she meant, she took the papers from my hands, tore them cleanly down the middle, and let the halves drift into the fireplace. We watched in silence as the pages curled and blackened. When the last corner turned to ash, Camille whispered, now whatever happens next. It's real. Months later, we left the city. The lake house wasn't hers or mine. It was something we found together. A small weathered cabin with uneven floors and a deck that faced the sunrise. There were no assistants, no meetings, no photographers. Just us. Some mornings, I'd wake before her and make coffee while she slept with one arm flung over the pillow, her hair unpinned, her face peaceful in a way I'd never seen in the city. Other days, she'd wake me first, pressing a steaming cup into my hands and saying, come outside. We'd sit on the steps wrapped in old blankets, watching the light break across the water. The world felt small and infinite all at once. Neither of us talked much in those hours. We didn't need to. Sometimes she'd reach for my hand, thumb brushing across my skin like a promise too quiet for words. And sometimes I'd catch her smiling to herself, the kind of smile that came from knowing, finally, that she didn't have to be anyone but herself. It's strange how love begins with noise, with slammed doors, sharp words, and reckless choices, and ends in silence. Not the heavy kind, but the kind that feels full. Now, when I think of Camille, I don't see the CEO in her glass tower. I see her barefoot in the morning light, laughing at how bad my coffee still tastes, stealing my scarf when the wind gets cold. Love, I've learned, isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or speeches. It's steady. It's earned. It's the sound of 2 cups touching on a wooden table, the rustle of pages in the breeze, and the quiet certainty of staying long after the contract has burned to ash.